Wow. Magical Girl Raising Project Queens. I don't even know how to begin with this one. My heart hurts. My emotions are in turmoil. I am another Ripple pincushion, especially this time. I don't even know how to process the ending of this book, this trilogy, and everything that went down in it. Um, we won, but we lost so much at the same time. Wow. There's not a lot of new characters in this one. So I'm just going to go ahead and run through the characters that were part of the cast, and then do the last two at the end. So we'll just go down the list here. First, we'll talk about Snow White. She really, in essence, did not do much this volume. She was brainwashed by Puck Puck. So Puck Puck's strategy were all her strategies were much more brutal and calculating, just because of Snow White being like Puck Puck's right hand man. I will say that the whole scene between Uluru and Snow White was pretty great. Just seeing how all this nonsense has been building up in Snow White's mind. She does not fall there to encourage her. She's locked up in the Puck Puck estate, and she's just angry at everything. Ripple is gone and hiding away from her. Frederica is outside and alive and causing havoc. Just all these things piling up on Snow White, and she didn't want to be called the magical girl hunter. She's putting on a mask of, being fine, but she's so far away from being fine. And then she's brainwashed the whole volume, and you just feel bad for her. At the end, Fall is like away with Frederica, or maybe it was the film that got thrown out in space. I'll get to that. But Snow White doesn't have her buddy with her, doesn't have Ripple with her. She's with Uluru, who did promise to help her find Frederica, so I do kind of like that growing pair. Um, I hope there's more that join the team for that effort, because Frederica at this point really does need to be stopped. I'm guessing she's like the final big bad. It just kind of is leading up to that. But yeah, Snow White, just rough. Uluru is getting a huge boost. I really, really appreciated what they did with her. She's like. See, this is real tough. She's above Inferno for sure. Above. Maybe Marika Fukudoi level, I think. Because. Yeah, that sounds a bit right. So, Uluru, out of the three sisters, right, she was the most loyal to Puck Puck, and once you realize that Puck Puck's magic is to make friends with everyone, you get the dark side of that. Uluru has been brainwashed practically her entire life to view Puck Puck as a really good and wonderful and great person, and her mindset was so warped that in this volume, it explores how Uluru dealt with not being under Puck Puck's control. She's confused on why she's doubting Puck Puck. She's almost like disgusted with Puck Puck on multiple occasions. And she really grows into her own character, right? Rather than just like Sachiko, we gotta do this thing for Puck Puck. She grows as someone who made a promise to Snow White and is realizing that Puck Puck is not all great. And her relationship with Mana was also really entertaining. They squeezed each other's hands tightly just to make sure that they were still part of the same unit and that they weren't brainwashed and they were charging forward. Obviously, they were butting heads, but that kind of dual perspective, right, of Uluru and Mana working on the battlefield, it was really entertaining. And notice, Mana and Uluru are both, they were both really close with their sisters, sisters in name. not by blood or anything, but basically they were like family. They were really close with their sisters, and then they lost their sisters, and now have that kind of motivation and anger and just drive to do something more with their lives. Mana is going full force into the investigation on what happened with Bee City and Frederica. Uluru is trying to fulfill a promise to Snow White and Shop Puck Puck. Like, there's that real big dynamic of all of that. Mana is going right next to Uluru. To think that Mana started in C and she's just been growing and growing. I'm so happy. I'm so happy. I was so happy I couldn't even speak. I'm so happy that Mana is more involved now, and that C2 is growing. Obviously, she's still angry, but it's more subdued. She still is not a magical girl, so she has to, inject herself just to keep up. But just the fact that she was paired with Uluru, I think, was a really smart decision because of their similar circumstances, and also the fact that they butt heads a lot. They're both rash a bit and prone to anger and just kind of fly by the seat of their pants sometimes. Mana's more capable in that sense. Uluru is just more forthright. But yeah, I really did enjoy all that with them. On the first page here, there is a certain character. When I say the first page, they always have all the magical girls displayed that will be involved in the volume, and there is a certain character here that I'm saving for last. If you've watched any of the other parts, you'll know what my thoughts will be. But anyway, let's go with Glacian next. Glacian, you're gonna go maybe here. Yeah. You had a cool moment at the end. I mean, when it focused on you alone in that tent, I knew you were gonna die. It was just, there was no way you were gonna survive. Just your role was too important that that you weren't gonna die. Her whole, she's like the piffle group version of Sorami, right? Because Sorami had that one cool fight scene at the end, and then she died. Glacian had that one cool fight scene at the end, and she died at that fight scene, right? She fought a bunch of Shufflin' Twos. She used her glasses to get a bird's eye view because she knew of Puck Puck's magic, and also just because of, if you don't make eye contact with your opponents, it's harder for them to read your movements, right? So yeah, Glacian, overall, you didn't do much in the story. You were just kind of part of a unit, but you had a cool fight scene at the end, so good on you for that. Next, we have Armor Arlie. She did like nothing. She did nothing in this volume except at the end. So at the end, Shadowgale loses a good portion of her memories, most of her memories, really. And because of that, Shadowgale is really despondent and spaced out. The only thing we get of Shadowgale's remaining self is, which by the way, Shadowgale ends up in her human form, but Armor Arlie is playing that same game that they played in Aces together with Shadowgale. I'm not sure if that's Arlie's way of like comforting Shadowgale in her spaced out, state. Or maybe Arlie just still views Shadowgale as a friend, despite everything that happened with them, I mean, they were both brainwashed by Puck Puck as well, so there is that. And they're both under Deluge's command. So, right now, you still kind of Stanzica position, I would say. I do really like her design, just that bulky armor design that you don't see anywhere else in the cast. She hasn't said a word, but you can tell that she's really kind and that she does care about Shadowgale a whole bunch. And with the events that happen, and I'll get to that character, Shadowgale really does need someone that she can lean on and recover mentally. So Armor Arlie, you are still a tentative A. You are a Stanzica level. I'm hoping we see more. Something interesting is that Armor Arlie is part of a unit. There is Blade Brenda and Cannon Catherine, the ABC. I'm wondering, so obviously Blade Brenda has a blade and Cannon Catherine has a cannon, right? I'm wondering if those two will appear in future volumes, because they were mentioned a good few times, but we don't have art of them. And those two fought against Dark Cutie and Piffle. So I'm wondering if they will make a reappearance here. But yeah, Armor Arlie is great. I did really enjoy her last volume, and I'm glad she's still around this volume. And I really, really appreciate how she's still playing that game with Shadow Gale. Next up here, let's do Princess Deluge. You're getting a bump up. And I kind of have to talk about Princess Deluge in tandem with Dark Cutie here. You're going right. Oh, whoa, that was postery. Whoops. Well, I'm going to stop recording for a sec because I have no idea where postery was, and I'm going to fix this. One moment. Alright, we're back. Whoops. Turns out Postery was right next to Deluge. I guess I should have expected that, but, whatever. We all make mistakes, right? Anyway, Deluge. I need to talk about Princess Deluge in tandem with Dark Cutie because they were really intertwined in this volume. You have Dark Cutie still searching for her heroine to, really fight against and connect with. And it turns out that brainwashed Snow White doesn't do it for her, right? And Deluge is aware of Dark Cutie's mindset. I guess they did work with each other a little bit. But something about how like the two conversations or so that Deluge and Dark Cutie had, you get more of Dark Cutie's real sincereness about her perspective. And Dark Cutie really analyzes Deluge in her mindset. She calls Deluge an Avenger. She calls Deluge a heroine near the end of the book. Like, she sees Deluge's growth, and it's not all positive, right? Deluge still has a lot of anger within her, and just a lot of aimlessness. And, with what happened at the end of the book, she's now thrust the responsibility of managing Shadow Gale and, just Piffle's whole group. And I guess I kept you all in the dark, but if you've read Queens, Piffle dies at the end. And I'm gonna save Piffle for last because she's my favorite, and I just want to save the best for last. But to dance around the subject is just probably redundant. So Piffle dies at the end. She asks that her memories, or rather Shadow Gale's memories of Piffle, be erased by another magical girl. That's why Shadow Gale is like that at the end, and Deluge is thrust the responsibility, as well as like the map, and I think like the assets of the artificial magical girl creation and all that. Point is, Deluge is enough to go almost toe to toe with Snow White when she gulps down a billion pills. Her fighting is always entertaining. I love how she has restrictions, but despite her power, I love her conversations with Dark Cutie. Just a lot of it was really profound. Dark Cutie is surprisingly profound. So Dark Cutie is muttering to herself in the tent and blah blah blah. And I'm gonna read another excerpt because I'm just like that. So, Deluge asked Dark Cutie, should a villain be thinking about that kind of stuff? She didn't necessarily mean it, but the nasty remark just slipped out of her mouth. Do you think that planning out a scenario isn't appropriate for a villain? Planning the scenario without the heroine finding out about it is part of a villain's job. No matter what Deluge said, Dark Cutie was going to justify herself anyway. Deluge closed her eyes. In the empty darkness, all that could be heard was Dark Cutie's words. An Avenger can sometimes become a heroine. She might also become a villain. However, those who die a petty death without managing to become either are far more common. I'm sure that's true, and it's just that they're never known, because nobody tells their stories. Deluge, are you an Avenger, or are you not? Deluge opened her eyes. Dark Cutie was still staring at the ground. That's how one of the chapter ends, I believe. So I'm just trying to find the next part here. Let's see. Just bear with me. There we go. Deluge readied herself. This is later on in the volume. Deluge readied herself in a sideways stance and whispered to Dark Cutie, "Didn't you want to fight Snow White?" Right now, Snow White is not a heroine. Deluge got the gist. "I might kill Snow White, though," she said. "If that's what happens, it's fine. You're okay with that?" You're a heroine too. Deluge didn't reply. She grabbed the pill and swallowed it, luxury mode on. So there's that acknowledgement from Dark Cutie to Deluge that she's become a heroine. I'm wondering if Dark Cutie will fight Deluge for her own gain or her own interests later on in the series, right? But yeah, I really like both of them. They jumped a bit, quite a bit in my eyes. So Dark Cutie's going next to Mana. Deluge is gonna go with her. So yeah, awesome job for them. Let me go back to the character images here. So that's Dark Cutie, Armor Early, Princess Deluge. Okay, we have a little bit of a doozy here. Bluebell Candy. So it turns out that if you recall in Volume 4 in the episodes, the first Lapis Lazuli was training the third one, right? With the second one being gone. Turns out Bluebell Candy is the third Lapis Lazuli. She just didn't know. So Bluebell, she can make magical candy that alter feelings. It turns out it's more than just feelings. It's memories too. I guess the first Lapis Lazuli had her erase her own memories, become the alter ego of Bluebell Candy, or maybe she was just Bluebell Candy before Lapis Lazuli the third. And during the course of Queens, first Lapis Lazuli makes her regain her memories, and then you see Bluebell Candy become much more competent. She goes around extracting the feelings of hatred and rage upon death from all the dying magical girls in this huge war, right at the ruins for the device. And you see her jumping around and doing the usual Lapis Lazuli stuff, and she's just like super competent, but also she's not as pure-hearted as the second incarnation. She's more like the first one, and you see that in the epilogue where she just has that evil smirk and is witty with her master, and you can tell that she's not afraid to do some bad stuff, but she's also got some good in her because she remembers her time as Bluebell Candy and respects Spiffle's wishes and Deluge's wishes because of that. So that does make me like her a fair bit. I'm gonna say just the intrigue. See, Deluge's like whole thing here, like Queens really boosted a lot of characters. I will say, and just enhanced them a lot, and I'm really glad. So she has a lot of intrigue. I'm wondering if she's gonna be a true like villain along with the Caspar faction, right? We actually got introduced to the third faction here. I'll get to them in a bit, but yeah, pretty great. The first Lapis Lazuli didn't do much, as usual, being the jerk that she is and the clever play. The first Lapis Lazuli is connected to the Caspar faction. Obviously, we have the other two factions down here, and I'll get to these. But we know the name of the third faction, and we have seen their incarnation. We just don't know the name of the incarnation. But yeah. So next up is CQ, Angel, Hamuel, and Shufflin 2. So it was a coin flip whether Hamuel was going to live or die. Unfortunately, she died, so I was very sad. But I loved her a whole bunch. And just that kind of, it's hard, right? Because I love her a whole bunch. She's probably going to go above Inferno. I'm breaking the Shufflin sandwich, but part of me wants to put her in S, right? But that's just my bias speaking. In terms of her role, she's pretty great, right? You see her as like the middleman between all these factions and throwing out her voice, issuing all these commands with her ability and trying to manage leagues upon leagues of magical girls and Shufflin 2s, and she's under the scrutiny of her new boss of the Osk faction, which is Lethe or Lethe. I can never pronounce. I think it's Greek, right? It's like it's like related to the River Styx or something, or is maybe the name of a nymph. And that's this new magical girl down here, which we'll get to. But Hamuel was really entertaining, and she was clever even through her relatively weaker ability and position, and her banter with Lethe Lethe. I'm just gonna call her Leth. I'll correct it next part if she ever reappears. But just Tamuel's whole banter with everyone really, and just her thoughts about everything. You could tell she was real stressed. I really liked her last volume. I'm glad she did more this volume. And she did one last thing before she went. She pulled a detect bell a little bit on a lesser scale, but you were great, Hamuel. So yeah, Shufflin too is like conjoined to her, so Shufflin too is gonna move up. We also just saw more of Shufflin here. Regular Shufflin with the Joker had more individuality, I guess. So you could argue that the Shufflin sandwich could be here. Why not? Why not? I mean, they're all part of the same group ish, so why not? So next is Shadowgale. So Shadowgale is reprising her role as someone who is used to enhance a different magical girl. In Restart, her perspective was for herself, of course, but also gave insight to Piffle. In Queens, she's brainwashed by Puck Puck, so we get the mindset of someone brainwashed by Puck Puck through Shadowgale. She's always a viewpoint to someone else. You notice that? Interesting. So she's like the key element in modifying the device and making sure it's to Puck Puck's needs and all that. So she's staying where she is. Sucks what happened to her though, with her memories because of Piffle's wish at the end. But I'm curious to see where her character will go from here. Is she going to be like Piffle, where she notices something is off, or is she not as inclined consciously to do something like that? I wonder how she'll progress as a character, especially being under the loser's care and Arlie's care. I don't really have much else to say, but she was the one that ended up killing Piffle, unfortunately, with her scissors because he was still under Puck Puck's spell as Puck Puck was dying. Just, that whole scene. We'll get to it. Next is Lethe. Leth, the new leader of the Osk faction after Grimheart has passed. She's going. You know what? She'll be part of the Shufflin sandwich because she was great. In the short time she was there, I left her a verbal tick where she just says, her ability to confound her opponent's sense of distance, and the one scene it was used in was really clever and nice. Her battle against Puck Puck, even though she lost because of Puck Puck's ability at the end, was really cool. I like how she carries the nobleness and just kind of like, I don't know, she thinks she's above everyone, that kind of noble air and kind of aloof nature. She carries that Grimheart had, but in a 100 times more appealing way. And I actually just like her design more too. The black as the main color works here again, but you have pinkish red as highlights, and it's just really fun. So I really enjoyed the time that we did have with her. Like Hamuel, she was a coin flip, and she lost a coin flip in Life or Death. But she was great, and it sucks to see her go. But if you really think about it, the Osk faction, they be suffering. They lost how many Shufflins, right? They lost Grimheart, Hamuel, and their new leader too. So Osk faction is, and all their magical girls that were guarding the ruins. They're in a rough state right now. Dang. But yeah, really cool new addition to the cast, even if it was quite temporary. So you're gonna go in the Shufflin sandwich, girl. You were real cool. Okay, so all that leaves is 2 left. So we have Puck Puck. Oh boy. As a leader of a faction who is the villain of an arc, so much better than Grimheart. So much better than Grimheart. We get more of her perspective. We understand that her mindset is due to her sheltered and just outside the box life as an incarnation. And Grimheart was like that too, but it's much more appealing with Puck Puck. She's all frilly and cutesy and genuinely thinks of all of her brainwashed people as friends and is aware of the effects of her magic, so she is cunning. Not as, like, she wouldn't be as crazy if Snow White wasn't there, but she is really cunning, and her ability is super dangerous in a completely different way than Grimheart. You realize that Grimheart was magically engineered and created to counter her, and she, in this volume, really shows why. Because you're in range, you're gone. You look at her for 30 seconds, you're gone. And the tactics that she ends up using and just all that is really just entertaining. She dies out of her own greed, so Sachiko, even in death, her contract, she had one contract remaining, she left it with Uluru. Uluru had it taken away from her by Puck Puck. Puck Puck was going to use it. Shadowgale signed it under Piffle's suggestion. Piffle was acting like she was brainwashed as well, but the contract had a clause to it. The bad luck wouldn't necessarily come to the person, it would come to whoever the person cared about most. For most people, that person is themselves, right? They can't live without themselves. For everyone brainwashed under Puck Puck, especially when she's maximizing her ability, they can't live without Puck Puck. So Shadowgale having signed the contract, Shadowgale being the one most under Puck Puck's spell, Shadowgale's gonna get all the good luck, Puck Puck's gonna get all the bad luck. In an ironic twist of fate, she gets crushed by the very machine she was so focused on using, and all the bad luck just comes to her at once, and she accepts her death, and she still protects her friends even throughout that. So I think she was genuinely entertaining as a character. She started out as someone who ate chip and drank cola and was like, Snow White, let's be friends, in her cutesy little form. But she's genuinely menacing. And as an incarnation of the Sage, we see her do more with just like flicking rocks and killing people by flicking rocks. Or people being Shuffling Twos. But by the way, being a Shuffling Two, you must be suffering. Whether you're the prototype or the desert version or the trainee type, or they introduced a whole bunch of types in this volume, didn't really expand on it, but there are different versions. Shuffling Twos are used as meat shields. They're used to charge in first. If I'm a magical girl, I do not want to be a Shuffling Two, because I know at one point I'm going to be abused and just die. Right? But Puck Puck was really, really entertaining. As a villain, is she Cranberry level? I don't know. I might put her... I do like her more than Nanako-san. She might be under Cranberry, just like right there. I'm surprised how much I like Puck Puck. I'm being honest with that. Just her ability did carry her a fair bit, and just like the brutalness of that brainwashing was crazy. It's different from Pukin, right? Pukin had that sort of air of, I guess it's a mix of a little bit of Cranberry and Pukin, where just that bloodthirst for torturing and all that. Pukin's mindset is stuck 130 years ago, and in terms of deaths, they couldn't be more different, right? Puck Puck died out of circumstance and just magic and her own greed. Pukin died tooth and nail. Beyond death, she was still fighting with her ability, with her sword. There's a difference there, and I do think the fact that we were able to see how people were affected by Puck Puck's magic more than Pukin's magic, that boosted her up a lot more. We saw Shadowgale, we saw the after effects of Uluru becoming free, wherever Uluru is. There we go. I'm losing track of my own list. But yeah, Puck Puck was real great. And also on the cover of the book, she has a magic wand that's a toy hammer, which is kind of funny. I don't think it's ever used, but it is pretty entertaining. All right, now we're to the last one here. Piffle. you all know, you should know at this point how much I love Piffle. Piffle has been my favorite. I love all her actions in the background. I love her dubiousness, her morally ambiguous actions, her means to the end. Ends justify the means. In Restart, she was wonderful. She was wonderful here as well because we see a completely different side of her. We actually get her perspective this time. We see, and a little bit in Aces as well, but more so in this book. We see that she just genuinely cares for Mamori as a person, for Shadowgale, right? And that she's willing to do whatever it takes to save Shadowgale because that's like the one person she's actually close with. And I don't know if it's like a codependent type of thing. You feel like that Shadowgale wants to get away from Piffle, but then you realize Shadowgale's been modifying Piffle's wheelchair a whole bunch, and we see that in action. Of course, her wheelchair can go at super fast speeds, right? But we see all the modifications as Piffle actually like fights in her wheelchair and goes crazy in the ruins. And I was so glad that we got to see that before she unfortunately passed away. So at the end, when Puck Puck is about to get crushed by the machine, everyone's still brainwashed. Shadowgale's going after her. Piffle grabs Shadowgale. Shadowgale, still being under the spell, stabs Piffle with the scissors. And Bluebell, Lapis Lazuli III, comes in a little too late and says, "Oh, I didn't make it in time, did I?" Piffle accepts her death, but asks that Shadowgale's memories of her be erased and asks to follow up with Deluge about all the other things. We see a more tender side of Piffle here because she hugs, as she's dying, she hugs the passed out Shadowgale, who's now in her human form because she's passed out, but she just dies hugging Shadowgale, like the one link to her, like, pure humanity that she had. Like, I'm getting emotional thinking about it, dude. I'm not gonna lie. In terms of anime and light novel and manga, there's very few times have I, like, teared up. And that whole scene with Piffle, and just thinking of it, it's getting me, man. When your favorite character, who's done a whole bunch, and there's a lot of emotion on her, when it gets to you and she dies like that, oh, man. But I haven't felt this much pain in this series since Restart, and it might be more so because it's my number one character, But sorry, Endo, you did your thing, man. You did your thing, and I was just as pierced as Piffle with Shadowgale's scissors there because it's brilliant and brutal, and my heart is twisted into a billion pieces. Man, you feel it's underlying, right? But you feel Piffle's desperation, especially once she gets her memories back. So Fall ends up having a conversation with Piffle, and this is actually what clued me in. I got a oh wow moment about Bluebell. When it was a candy in Snow White's magical phone that restored Piffle's memories. And, it was mentioned that there was a Lapis Lazuli III that helped Piffle extract her memories. And it was, in fact, Bluebell candy. So there was that kind of oh wow moment. And you could tell they had this deal when Bluebell came a little too late to save Piffle's life and all that. But, man, Piffle, for the time that we had you, and it was a generous amount of time, I was really glad to read you as a character. And what destroyed me even more, right? I mean, Piffle gets a couple of arts in this volume. She has one where she's drinking tea with Mana, right, at the beginning. And then at the end, there's always an illustration from Madarino, the artist. But before I get to that, there is one where she's standing in front of Shadowgale trying to deceive her by making Shadowgale believe that she's brainwashed. So there's two. And then the last illustration, there's always a bonus one, like I mentioned, from Madarino, and it was of Piffle. And there's something about the way Piffle looks. I gotta process it again because looking at it, I feel the emotions coming up. There's something about the way Piffle looks in this image. Usually there's a quip about the characters on screen or the arc. We just have a thank you very much, Maruino, right? And then we have Piffle sitting, perhaps kneeling. We don't see her wheelchair. And she's taken off her bird eye patch, which, as we know from Restart, represents her grandfather. She did that on purpose. In one hand, she's holding it as the strings of the eye patch dangle down, and the bird part of the eye patch is tilted, and she's just holding it tenderly above her other hand. And she's looking down, kind of reserved, almost peaceful, with a somber smile. And it just looking at this hits me. Like I can't look at it too long. I can already feel the but yeah, Piffle really got me. And she's getting me right now in the middle of recording. But yeah, Piffle, I'm gonna miss you. I'm really gonna miss you. This is probably, I would say, the specific book is on the level of Restart for me. I can't pick one over the other. Restart maybe is a little more because I had more characters overall that I genuinely felt pain for. But this was brilliant. Sorry, Endo. I said during Jokers and Aces that I was waiting for the payoff in Queens, and it really did pay off. You hit me in so many different ways. It was such brilliant writing, and we won, but we lost. Fall is with Frederica, which we actually got Frederica's human form, Yoshioka, and we learned about the Caspar faction that Lazarine is a part of, and a little more of that. I couldn't tell if Fall was the magical form that got sent into space, or it is just with Frederica. But yeah, so many enhancements from a main volume for these characters. The Queen's cast is genuinely brilliant. And that crazy ending, which left me dead inside, just was the final nail on the head, hammer on the nail, however you say it. Yeah. Queens is a fitting title. You have all these faction leaders, which are basically like the queens, fulfilling their own desires and fighting against each other. And every single girl in this volume is a queen because they all are super cool and good. So, yeah, just I'm bewildered and broken. And there's another episodes after this. I believe it's episodes Delta. And it actually has some of the girls down here from Free to Play, which is a manga, a spin-off manga, and then Breakdown, which is a web series, which seems to have been serialized into later light novel volumes. So I'm not going to worry about reading those first. And if there are characters I don't understand in the episodes volume next time, then so be it. I'll get context to them eventually. But yeah. There's so many moving pieces in this series, and when they converge and blow up and all this stuff happens, you're just left with greatness. So I'm gonna take time to heal. And by time to heal, I'm going to use episodes as time to heal and hope there's no depressing stories like Akane or at Meow Meow or Lapis Lazuli, which was not depressing. Lazarines episode stories, they're just bittersweet at the end because of this first Lapis Lazuli, but I digress. We'll be back because if I wasn't moving on for Piffle before, I am now. And for all these other characters, Snow White and Ripple. Ripple is also under the Caspar faction with Lazarine, which, oh my goodness, Ripple, what's going on with you? I hope you're all right. Please, I need people to be all right after what, because I'm not all right right now. But yeah, beautiful, brutal, and bewildering, I think, are the ways to describe how I'm feeling about this volume right now, and that's all in a wonderful and good way. So, forever we charge forward, and you know what? Lights be to you, Piffle. Respect to you, and your grandfather. And I hope Shadow Gale will miss you, because I do. Your wheelchair racing at super fast speeds. May you do that wherever you are now. And I hope you enjoy your tea with a happy smile on your face, because you are wonderful. Truly.